I'm James with Net News Ledger. I'm here with Grand Council Chief Patrick Madahbee from the Union of Ontario Indians. Patrick, we've been talking a lot lately about education. What does the federal government need to do to balance the scales in education?
Well, I guess, right from the get-go, I guess the question should be asked, should the federal government be even given another chance to try to address, delivery of education systems after the dismal failure with a number of experiments they've tried over the years, most notably the residential school era. But I think, the mistake that they've made is that thinking a one-size-fits-all across the country, is such a diverse country amongst the very diverse nations who have their own views about how education services should be delivered, to their children. They tout themselves as, defenders of law and order, and yet they're breaking Supreme Court laws by a failure to consult First Nations. This going through the motions of, having a hearing maybe in one urban center, like they did here in Thunder Bay as an example, as an idea of consultation where they only meet a few people who came basically just to inquire, what is being proposed, and never got any answers. And when we try to, question the regional folks at the regional offices of Indian Affairs, they didn't have any answers either because, this is all a top-down approach. And that's wrong. This has to be community-driven. And I think that is the strength of, any school system, is the community involvement in the school system, the parental involvement, the involvement of family, the involvement of the community as a whole. And, trying to get something rammed down our throats is not the answer. So I think the federal government has to take a step back. I'll give them kudos for the fact that after telling the Canadian public and telling us for many, many years that there was no gaps in education, they finally admitted it. I guess before rolling out their last effort at the First Nations Control of Education Act, and they finally admitted that there are major gaps in education services, and that they put up the dollar figure of $1.9 billion to try to address First Nations education service delivery. Now, $1.9 billion sounds like a lot of money, but if you divide that up between 630 some First Nations across the country and spread it out over a 7-year period, starting in a couple of years, it doesn't amount to that much money. And also the capital component of it, where there are a lot of First Nations that do need schools or old schools that need upgrading or repairs, it boils down to a very minimal amount of money. In fact, if you do the math and divide that up, I believe the capital amount only worked out to about $68,000 per First Nation. And I think even on the other, dividing that up, worked something like $248,000 or $244,000 per First Nation. Those may not be the exact figures, but that gives you an example of, what it boils down to if you divide it up that much among over 600 communities across the vast territory of Canada. So when you ask me the question, what should the federal government do? They need to start this whole process properly, and listen to the regions. We just came back from an Assembly of First Nations meeting in Halifax. Again, if they're going to listen to the First Nations categorically rejected this bill. Yep. They don't want it back. And they said the federal government needs to put the resources that they identified in that last bill towards regional approaches to developing education. There are success stories, in terms of when First Nations have been given the resources to tackle education in terms of, how they see, the proper curriculum. Our history, our culture component to it, our languages need to be included in the curriculum. It creates pride. It creates, a self-worth and identity. And you see the success. The Mi'kmaq, for example, who have negotiated a self-government agreement on education, have numbers that have surpassed the provincial average in terms of success of their students. We have an example here in Ontario. Kettle and Stony Point First Nation down in southwestern Ontario. They've had help with resources for a 5-year literacy program that involved the Paul Martin Foundation, Larry Tottenbaum with the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, McCain Foods, Margaret McCain was involved. There was the Paul Martin Foundation, obviously, and there was another gentleman, his name just slips me. Was involved as a shipping in the shipping industry. They helped provide some resources to Kettlestoney Point First Nation, and they too have already demonstrated in that 5-year period, that the grade average has surpassed the provincial average with the students in that school. But what's really interesting to note about that situation is that because the kids had the support of the parents, they had the support of the community, the chief and council, and the community as a whole. Those kids are confident. They're talking. I go into communities a lot, and they say, "What do you want to do when you get older?" Somebody say, "Well, I want to be a policeman. I want to be a teacher." I'm starting to hear these kids saying, "Well, I want to be a forensic scientist. I want to be an archaeologist. I want to be a biochemist." And I'm thinking to myself, "Wow, these kids are, they're seeing the bigger world. They're not just seeing, the traditional occupations you see in our little communities. They're looking at the world picture now." And the confidence level they have and the pride they have in their own culture is just phenomenal when you see the success that these children are having. So, that's a good base, because what happens then is those kids are now going to go on to higher levels of education, and they're going to have a solid foundation. They're going to have solid confidence and strength, and they'll succeed.
Absolutely. We see that a lot when we get out into the communities and you talk to the kids. You have a problem with your computer, you hand it to a kid, it comes back fixed before you know how to turn it on.
Yeah.
They're getting smarter all the time.
Well, my grandson just turned 12 on July 14th. But ever since he's been, 5, 6, 7 years old, he's no more. He's handier with, Facebook, and he does all this stuff. He's on a computer. It's a natural thing to them. These kids grew up with this type of stuff. I mean, I feel like an old dinosaur when it comes to a computer compared to what my grandson can do. And
I remember being the remote control.
Dad
would say he would change the channel, and you stood there.
And the kids today, they're very adept with all of the electronic media and social media. The whole world is at their disposal now.
We're finding that we're at an event that Cheyenne Havorka put together, and one of the young drummers learned how to drum by watching YouTube.
Unbelievable.
And I've had one of the young people who helps us now and then, Munzi Nikan, he will go on YouTube to learn grass dance steps. And it's stop, start, and he's literally using the internet as a teaching tool that he can't get at school. So having more involvement from community would probably get better balance for the youth.
Well, I think, access to that technology, I mean, you take a class project. When I was in school, you could maybe go to the library and look up an encyclopedia or some book in the library to give you some background material on your project. Today, it's so simple. They can Google and get information from all over the world.
So basically what we really need then is we need the federal government to stop trying to be the leaders and start being the followers and listen to the grassroots.
Well, they can be partners with us. I think this government needs to show some success with working with First Nations. So far, the relationship with this federal government has been quite the opposite in terms of working with First Nations. It's always been my way or the highway type of approach. And, I think, ironically, there have been gains made in the past with conservative governments. And I think, if Prime Minister Harper and Minister Valcourt, want to hang their hat on something, I think they should listen to First Nations about education. Education is one of the foundational elements, that all communities need, to build capacity so that we can be strong contributors to the economy. We can be strong people in the workforce. Right now, immigration is so high. They're bringing in, 400,000, 600,000 people, immigrants every year, because they say they have a shortage of a workforce. Well, we have an able-bodied young workforce right here in Canada, and a lot of the places where they need this workforce is right where our people live, in the more remote northern communities where our people are and lived on the land. They're used to being in that environment. So what more, could you do than to build the capacity of the local people and they're going to spend that money in the local economy. You know, they're not going to be sending that money back abroad. You know, they're going to be spending that in the local economy. I mean, anytime there's been any kind of settlement, for example, like a land claim settlement, where do you think that money gets spent? It gets spent and it gets regenerated back into the local economy for goods and services and purchasing at the local stores. I mean, so this can be a win-win to really help stimulate the economy as a whole. I think if we can build capacity, get people more involved with partnerships and development with that's going on with developments in our territories, but even the creation of small business. I mean, that's in any society, small business development is a real strength of a community, and I think a lot of our First Nations who are so used to buying goods and services outside of our communities, I think would like to bring those types of services right into the community. I'll give an example. Where I come from, on Manitoulin now, we did a leakage study of what First Nations pump out into the surrounding communities, because we don't have those services in our communities. And there's about 6 or 7 communities right in an immediate geographical location there. And we found that we're pumping out to the tune of between $81 and $83 million annually into the local economy. Now that's big business. And there's gaps there, and it's easy to say, from analyzing where we spend the most of those resources, what is the type of industry and businesses we need to bring into our communities. That'll create jobs. That'll stabilize our community, stabilize family units. What's the alternative when you don't have a job to wake up to when you wake up in the morning? You sit around and you're on social assistance. It's bleak, and people try to escape. That's why we have such problems with addictions. So I mean, education is a real key here, and for our youth, our youth are hungry to learn, and they really want to better themselves. They really want to get strong. They too get bored. I mean, it's boring sitting around all day with no money in your pocket, with no hope, no place to go. You sit around. I mean, you can only watch TV so much, and then sit around, and you can only party so much. There comes a point in time where even that scene becomes a drag, because it's the same old, same old. I mean, some people do it, and they do it till they die, and some of them die very young. Yes. And that's a tragedy that's going on in our communities. These addictions have got a hold of some people. Well, take a look around, at positive things that go on in our communities, and I really would recommend, to our youth, you want to be positive, stay with positive people. Don't hang around with the losers in the community. You'll be a loser as well. Stick around. Growing up, I had a tendency to hang around with older folks. Nobody in my own age group. What could we teach each other? Other than getting into mischief, I tended to gravitate to my older uncles and aunties and other people in the community that, always inquisitive, be like a sponge, just read everything you can, get a hold of, any information, learn, you want to know how somebody does something, go and ask them. They'll tell you, they'll show you,
It's a special part of the culture too, is the sharing.
For sure. Our people learn by doing. Our people learn by watching. We're very visual people. And so, I say to young people, you're not learning nothing just glued to a TV all day. You need to get out and you're interested in what people are doing around the community. And there's lots of interesting things going on. You may think it's boring out there. It just seems that way. But there's lots going on.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today.
No problem,
I'm sure
James.
We'll be talking again and again.
Okay, have a good day.
Thank you.